The wind moved like a whisper over the prairie, lifting dust from the worn path that led to the edge of nowhere. There, nestled against the belly of the horizon, stood a cabin with peeling paint and quiet bones. It had not known laughter in 10 years, nor footsteps that did not belong to one man alone. Boone Carver lived inside it like a ghost in his own skin, rising with the sun and sleeping with the crickets. His hands were dark with earth and work. His voice, when it did break the silence, came low, like it didn't quite trust the air to carry it right. He didn't go into town unless he had to, and when he did, folks kept their distance. They said Boone once had a wife who died birthing a child that didn't make it either. They said he buried them both beneath the cottonwood tree behind his house, and that something inside him went cold that same day. Whether it was all true or not, nobody pressed too close to find out. Boone preferred it that way. The land had shaped his silence. It had taught him how to be alone without being lonely, how to live without wanting more. That is, until the storm rolled in. It came sudden, roaring over the plains like it had unfinished business with the earth. The sky turned to iron and the wind cracked across the open field. Boone was chopping wood when he saw the coach wheel in from the east, off course, out of time. It struggled against the mud, creaked to a halt just past his fence line. He paused, axe still in hand, as the driver climbed down and pulled something, or someone, out of the back. A woman. She staggered forward, drenched from head to heel, bonnet limp around her face, her hands clutching a damp letter as if it could explain her whole story. Boone watched, unmoving, as she dragged herself through the rain and up his steps. Her eyes found him just once before her knees buckled, and she collapsed on his porch without a word. Boone didn't shout, didn't call out. He stepped over to her slowly, as one might approach a skittish horse. Her skin was cold to the touch. Mud clung to her hem. He lifted her, thin and soaked, into his arms and carried her inside like a man remembering how to hold something that mattered. She woke to the scent of broth and firewood. A heavy quilt draped over her, and her boots sat drying near the hearth. Her fingers trembled as she pushed herself upright. Across the room, Boone sat in his chair with a worn book open but unread in his lap. "You're safe," he said quietly. The words sounded like they'd rusted in his throat. "My name's Ella," she answered. Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. "Ella Mae Dawson. I was supposed to meet someone. Jedediah Mark. He sent for me." She glanced at the crumpled letter on the side table. "Only, he didn't come. The coach driver dropped me when the rain started. Said this was the last house before the bluff." Boone listened without nodding, without blinking much. When she finished, he stood and said only, "You can stay the night." She wanted to ask more, why he helped, what he was thinking, if he'd send her away come morning, but something in his stillness quieted the questions. She drifted back to sleep with the storm easing outside, unaware that something in the house had already shifted. In the days that followed, Boone said little, and Ella didn't push him. He showed her where the well was, handed her a fresh towel in the mornings, and left biscuits wrapped in cloth by her door. She cleaned the windows and scrubbed the hearth, partly out of gratitude, partly because she didn't know what else to do. She moved through the house like someone waiting for permission to breathe again. The town was a half-day's ride, and Boone went only once, returning with flour, coffee, and a second hairbrush. He left it on her table without a word. She ran her fingers over the carved handle and wondered what it meant, that small act, quiet and unassuming. It felt more sincere than any of Jedediah's flowery promises written in ink that now bled with rain. Ella found herself watching Boone. Not out of fear, but curiosity. He moved with a kind of reverence, like even the air in his house had memories he didn't dare disturb. She saw the way he paused near a closed door on the second floor, how he avoided the music box on the mantel. She noticed how his eyes softened when he watched the prairie light stretch across the walls in the early morning, how his shoulders eased slightly when she hummed without meaning to. Boone caught her gaze more than once but said nothing of it. The silence between them wasn't empty, It was heavy, like 2 stories hanging in the balance, neither yet told. One afternoon, she ventured out to the cottonwood tree. Its limbs swayed in the breeze, soft and sure. 2 small wooden markers rested in the dirt, no names, just initials. She knelt and pressed her palm to the earth. Boone appeared beside her a moment later, hat in hand. "That was Mary," he said. "And the boy, Caleb. He came too early. Fever took her not long after." Ella didn't speak, just looked up at him. Boone's jaw tightened, and his voice turned to gravel. "Didn't think I'd ever make room for another soul under this roof." She didn't offer pity, just sat with him there as the wind carried dust between the markers. He lowered himself beside her slowly. "I ain't got answers for you, Ella May," he murmured. "Don't even know if you're meant to be here." "But I am," she said softly. For the first time, Boone didn't look away. That night, she cooked stew and set 2 places at the table. He came without prompting. They ate without much talk, but the sound of 2 spoons scraping plates was a kind of music the house hadn't heard in years. The porch creaked beneath them after supper as they watched the moon rise over the fields. Boone handed her a chipped mug of warm cider. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. Inside, the fire burned slow and steady. Ella folded the blanket across the back of the chair. Boone watched her, a quiet question behind his eyes. She didn't answer it. Not yet. But she stayed. And sometimes that's the first mercy a heart learns to offer. The wind had softened in the weeks since Ella arrived, but something older and meaner was stirring just past the quiet. Boone could feel it in his bones, the way old men feel a storm before the sky admits it. The land was beginning to green with late spring, wildflowers blooming along the fence-line, and yet every sunrise brought with it a tension, stretched tight like a wire between what was and what might soon come. Ella had begun to find rhythm in the days. She gathered eggs, kneaded bread with flour Boone brought home in his saddlebag, and hummed while hanging linens. Boone kept his distances mostly, though now and then he'd pause mid-chore just to watch her without knowing why. Her presence, once so foreign, had grown into the walls. He didn't speak it aloud, but the stillness of the house no longer seemed so comforting when she left to fetch water or walk alone. She never brought up Jedediah again, though Boone hadn't forgotten the name. Something in the way she flinched at loud noises or lingered too long before locking the front door told him there were chapters of her story still closed to him. He didn't ask. Some scars tell themselves only when they're good and ready. But the world, Boone had learned, doesn't wait on healing. The man rode in on a rust-colored horse, his hat pulled low, and his coat flapping like a banner of warning. Boone was fixing a fence post when he saw the rider and knew, before he heard the voice, who it had to be. Jedediah Mark. He reined in hard outside the cabin, dismounting with a crooked grin and a cruel glint in his eye. Ella came onto the porch, her face blanching as recognition stole the breath from her. "Well now," Jedediah said, voice sticky with mock courtesy, "you did make yourself comfortable." Boone stepped between them, silent, unmoving. "I don't know who you think you are, mister," Jedediah sneered, "but she's mine. I paid for her papers fair. You're harboring stolen goods." Ella's voice broke as she stepped forward. "You left me stranded." Jedediah turned, a snarl barely hidden. "I paid my money. You were supposed to be waiting in town, not hiding out here like a dog." "She ain't yours," Boone said, quiet as thunder in the distance. Jedediah laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "You planning on keeping her? Old man like you? I don't see a ring on her finger." Boone didn't flinch. "You'll leave now." Jedediah's eyes narrowed, his hand drifting to the blade at his side. "You forget how the law works out here?" Boone didn't draw. He didn't raise his voice. But he took a step forward that said more than a gun ever could. Jedediah hesitated. Boone's stare wasn't angry, it was worse. It was certain. Jedediah spat into the dust. "You'll regret this." He mounted his horse and rode off, but not fast enough to mask the tremble in his hands. That night, Boone sat out by the cottonwood tree, his lantern flickering beside him. Ella joined him with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She didn't speak, not at first. They listened to the crickets, to the creak of the porch swing in the wind. "He used to come after me when he'd been drinking," she said finally. "Told me I was lucky to have him. Said no one else would want me with a busted past." Boone didn't answer with words. He reached out and placed something in her palm. A hair comb, delicate, carved with worn edges. "Mary's," he said. "I think she'd want someone kind wearing it." Ella's fingers closed around it, her breath hitching. "Why are you doing this?" Boone looked to the grave markers beneath the tree. "Because I don't want to bury another woman I should have protected." She leaned against him, tentative. He didn't pull away. 2 days later, the sheriff came knocking. Word had reached town. Ella wasn't the only one Jedediah had tried to claim. Miriam Hale, ever the town's tongue, told the sheriff about Ella's arrival, about Boone's silence, and about the man who came looking for trouble. Sheriff Darden Pike leaned on the porch post like he owned it. "Boone, you know I respect you, but that man's got paperwork. Technically, she's bound to him." "She's a human being," Boone said. "Not a crate of whiskey." "She's stayin' here?" "Yes." Pike sighed. "If Marks comes back, and this turns bloody, I'll have no choice but to side with the law as it stands." Boone nodded once. "You'll do what you have to." "So will I." The sheriff tipped his hat. "Be careful, Carver." When Jedediah returned, it was just past sundown. Boone had been waiting. He came drunk, just like the last time, staggering through the yard shouting Ella's name. A lantern swung from his hand. Boone stood at the top of the porch steps, arms crossed, calm as still water. "Where is she?" Jedediah bellowed. "You think you can hide her from me? You're not taking her." Jedediah pulled the knife. Boone stepped off the porch. The two men circled like old wolves. No theatrics, no bluster. Just years of pain and pride waiting to boil. Jedediah lunged. Boone dodged, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it hard enough that the blade dropped into the dirt. With a practiced sweep, Boone forced him to the ground, binding his arms behind him with a rope already waiting. The sheriff arrived minutes later, summoned by Ella, who had run to town on horseback the moment Jedediah returned. He stepped off his own horse and saw Jedediah hogtied in the dirt, sputtering curses. "Guess that saves me the trouble," Pike muttered, hauling the man up. "Looks like self-defense, clear as day." Ella stood at the doorway, breathless and shaking. Boone met her eyes. He didn't smile. He just nodded, like everything they'd survived finally meant something. The next morning, she made coffee and placed 2 mugs on the porch rail. Boone sat beside her in his usual seat. The land stretched out before them, endless and golden. "You want me to stay?" she asked. Boone didn't answer right away. He looked at her the way a man does when he sees the thing he thought he'd never deserve. "I'd be glad if you did." She smiled softly, not needing more. Sometimes it's not grand declarations that stitch broken hearts back together. Sometimes it's a woman planting sunflowers by a man's doorstep. Sometimes it's silence shared in peace rather than sorrow. And sometimes it's simply the act of staying, when you no longer have to, that says everything.